There are stories that people don't want to hear. Stories that make them uncomfortable, that disturb their sleep, that force them to confront the darkest capabilities of human nature. This is one of those stories. I've carried it inside me for 57 years, and it has carved out a hollow space in my chest where my heart used to be. But today, at 78 years old, I'm going to speak it aloud. Not because I've healed. You don't heal from something like this, but because silence has protected monsters for too long. My name is Maria Santos. I was 21 years old when the war came to my village. I was newly married, for months pregnant, filled with hope for the future despite the darkness gathering at our borders. I had dreams. I had plans. I had a husband who loved me and a child growing inside me that we'd already named Sophia, if she was a girl, Daniel, if he was a boy. By the time the war was over, my husband was dead. My baby was dead. And I had witnessed atrocities that would have broken a lesser person. But here's what the Major didn't understand when he tried to destroy me. Survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about spite. Sometimes you live just to make sure your tormentor doesn't get away with what they did. I survived to testify. I survived to watch him hang. And I'm still here, decades later, to tell you exactly what happened so that no one can ever say it didn't. This is my testimony. This is my truth. And I'm asking you to bear witness, because that's all I've ever wanted. For someone to know, for someone to remember, for someone to say, I believe you. It happened. And it mattered. The village where I grew up was small, maybe 300 people, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. We grew coffee and corn, raised chickens and goats, lived simple lives that followed the rhythms of planting and harvest. Everyone knew everyone. Marriages were celebrated by the entire community. Children were raised by the village, not just their parents. I met my husband, Carlos, when I was 17. He was a teacher at the village school, 5 years older than me, gentle and patient and kind. He taught me to read better, to write poetry, to see beauty in words. We married when I was 19, in a ceremony under the old ceiba tree, where generations of couples had exchanged vows. When I discovered I was pregnant, it felt like the world had expanded to contain more joy than I'd thought possible. Carlos would place his hand on my belly every night and talk to the baby, telling stories, singing soft songs. We were so naive. We thought love could protect us from anything. The war had been happening in other parts of the country for 2 years. We heard about it on the radio, saw refugees passing through occasionally, but it felt distant, abstract. Wars happened to other people in other places. Until the day it didn't. They came on a Tuesday morning in September. Military trucks rolling into the village, kicking up dust, soldiers jumping out with weapons raised. The Major was in the first truck. I remember seeing him step down, adjusting his uniform, surveying our village like he owned it. He was tall, maybe 40 years old, with a thick mustache and cold eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. The soldiers rounded us up in the village square. Men separated from women. Children clinging to their mothers. The Major walked among us, making pronouncements about insurgents and collaborators, about the need for order and discipline. His voice was calm, almost bored, as if he'd given this speech 100 times before. They took my husband with the other men. I watched them march the men away toward the old warehouse at the edge of the village. Carlos looked back at me once, and I saw fear in his eyes but also love, always love. That was the last time I saw him alive. The women and children were ordered to return to our homes. We would be interviewed one by one, they said. We were to cooperate fully or face consequences. The Major's eyes swept over us as he spoke, and when his gaze landed on me, something changed in his expression. He noticed my pregnant belly, visible beneath my dress. And he smiled. I should have run then. But where would I have gone? The village was surrounded by soldiers. The mountains, while offering potential escape, were treacherous for someone in my condition. And I still harbored the foolish hope that this was temporary, that someone would come to restore order, that my husband would return. Hope can be the cruelest thing. They came for me that evening. 2 soldiers knocked on my door as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty street. The Major wants to see you, one said. His face was young, maybe 19, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. They walked me to the church. which the major had commandeered as his headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on me, conducting interrogations in a house of God. But I've learned that monsters often prefer sacred spaces. There's an extra cruelty in defiling what's meant to be holy. The major was sitting behind a desk that had been Father Miguel's, our priest who had fled 2 days before the soldiers arrived. Maps were spread across the surface. A bottle of whiskey sat open, half empty. He was smoking a cigar, the smoke curling up toward the wooden beams of the ceiling. Maria Santos, he said, consulting a paper in front of him. Age 21. Married to Carlos Santos, the schoolteacher. 4 months pregnant. He looked up at me. Is that correct? I nodded, my hand instinctively moving to protect my belly. Your husband has been identified as a collaborator with the insurgents, he continued. Multiple witnesses have confirmed he was passing information to rebel forces. Do you know anything about this? That's not true, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Carlos is a teacher. He has nothing to do with politics or rebels. He teaches children to read. The major smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everyone has something to do with politics, whether they admit it or not. Neutrality is a myth. Your husband made his choice. Now you need to make yours. What choice? I asked, though I was beginning to understand that there was no real choice here, only the illusion of one. Cooperate with us. Tell us what you know about rebel activities in this area. Give us names of sympathizers. He paused, took a long drink from his whiskey glass. Or face the consequences of your husband's betrayal. I don't know anything, I said. We're just simple people. We grow coffee. We teach children. We don't know anything about rebels. The major studied me for a long moment, then stood and walked around the desk. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step calculated to increase my fear. When he reached me, he circled me like a predator assessing prey. You're very beautiful, he said softly, his breath hot against my ear. Pregnancy suits you. There's something particularly appealing about a woman carrying life, don't you think? Something fertile, ripe. My skin crawled. I tried to step away, but his hand shot out and grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I'm going to give you time to reconsider your position, he said. Think carefully about what you know. Tomorrow we'll talk again. And Maria? He leaned in close. I always get what I want. One way or another. He released me, and the soldiers escorted me back to my house. I locked the door, pushed furniture against it, and sat in the darkness, my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move inside me. I prayed to every saint I could remember, begged God for protection, for escape, for anything. But God wasn't listening. Or if he was, he had already decided that my prayers would go unanswered. The next 3 weeks were a nightmare of escalating terror. They would come for me every few days. Sometimes for interviews where the major would ask the same questions, and I would give the same answers. Sometimes just to remind me that I was being watched, that I had no privacy, no safety. Other women in the village were suffering too. I could hear screams at night, see the haunted looks on their faces during the day. The soldiers took what they wanted: food, valuables, women's bodies. The major controlled it all with casual authority, as if our village was his personal fiefdom, and we were his property to dispose of as he wished. One night, 3 weeks after they'd arrived, he came to my house himself. No soldiers, no escort. Just him, walking through my broken door as if he owned it, carrying his bottle of whiskey and that same cold smile. I've been patient with you, Maria, he said. More patient than I am with most. Do you know why? I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. My small house had only 2 rooms, and he was blocking the exit. Because you're special, he continued, advancing slowly. Because I enjoy the challenge. Because watching you try to maintain your dignity, your defiance, even as your world crumbles around you, it's entertaining. Please, I whispered. I'm pregnant. Please don't. Don't what? He laughed. Don't take what's already mine? Everything in this village is mine, Maria. Every person, every animal, every grain of rice. And especially you. What happened next, I won't describe in graphic detail. Not because I've forgotten. Every second is burned into my memory with crystalline clarity. but because some violations don't need to be relived in their specifics for you to understand their horror. He raped me while I was pregnant with my husband's child. He did it deliberately, violently, while I begged and cried and prayed for death. And when he was finished, he sat on the edge of my bed, drank from his bottle, and told me about the other women he'd done this to. He spoke about it casually, as if discussing the weather or a sports match. He wanted me to know I wasn't special, that this was just another Tuesday evening for him. "Your husband is dead, by the way," he said as he was leaving. "Executed 2 weeks ago with the other collaborators. I thought you should know." He left me there, bleeding and broken on the floor of my own home. My baby still moving inside me, alive despite everything. I lay there until morning, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but exist in the aftermath of violation. But here's what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known. I was stronger than he thought. Not immediately. Not that night or the next week. But somewhere deep inside me, beneath the trauma and the pain and the horror, a core of pure rage was forming. It would take time to grow, to solidify into something I could use. But it was there waiting. The major returned regularly after that. Sometimes every few days, sometimes daily. There was no pattern, no way to predict when he would appear. That was part of the torture. The constant anticipation, the inability to ever feel safe, even for a moment. My pregnancy continued despite everything. My body, with stubborn determination, kept nourishing the life inside me. I was 6 months along now, obviously pregnant, my belly swollen and tight. The baby kicked vigorously, seemingly unaware of the hell we were trapped in. The major was fascinated by my pregnancy. He would place his hands on my belly, feeling the baby move, and talk about it with a strange mixture of violence and tenderness that made my skin crawl. "It's strong," he would say. "Resilient, like its mother. I wonder what kind of person it will grow into," knowing it was conceived in love, but born from violation. He was trying to poison even the love I had for my unborn child, trying to make me associate my baby with him rather than with Carlos. It was psychological torture layered on top of physical violation. Other women in the village tried to help me when they could. They would leave food at my door, or sit with me when the soldiers weren't watching, or share what little medicine they had. We formed a quiet network of survival, helping each other endure the unendurable. But the major noticed, and he punished any kindness shown to me. When old Rosa brought me eggs, they took her son. When young Carmen tried to give me herbs to help with the pregnancy pain, they burned her house. The message was clear. I was to be isolated, alone with my suffering, so that he could be the only source of any human contact, however twisted. It was a form of control, of breaking down my sense of self until I had nothing left but dependence on him. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it now. But I never developed it. Not once. Every time he touched me, every time he spoke to me, every time he pretended to show concern for my well-being, I hated him more. That hate kept me alive. It gave me purpose. It reminded me that I was still human, still capable of feeling something other than fear and pain. I was 7 months pregnant when he escalated again. "I've been thinking," the major said one evening, sitting in my kitchen as if we were old friends sharing conversation. "About your baby. About what will happen when it's born." I said nothing. I'd learned that silence was sometimes the safest response. "A child born from such a union," he continued, swirling whiskey in his glass. "What place would it have in this world? Unwanted by everyone. A constant reminder of everything that happened here." "The baby is innocent," I said, unable to stay silent when he threatened my child. "Is it?" He looked at me with those cold eyes. "Or is it tainted from the moment of conception? Your husband's child, yes, but carried through months of your humiliation. Fed by your body while I fed on you. What kind of creature emerges from that?" He was trying to make me hate my own baby, to plant seeds of doubt and revulsion that would grow alongside my child. And I realized then that he didn't just want to violate my body. He wanted to violate my mind, my spirit, my very capacity for love. "I won't let you take this from me too," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "You've taken my husband, my home, my dignity, my body. But this baby is mine. And you can't have it." He smiled that terrible smile. We'll see about that. I was 8 months pregnant when the worst happened. The baby was due in a month, and despite everything, I had begun to allow myself small fantasies about the future. Maybe the war would end. Maybe the soldiers would leave. Maybe I would escape with my baby and find somewhere safe to raise her. Maybe. The major came to my house late one night, drunker than usual. He was angry about something. A battle that had gone badly, perhaps, or orders from superiors he disagreed with. He took his anger out on me, more violently than he ever had before. And then, in a moment I still can't comprehend even after all these years, he said, "I want to see it. I want to see this baby you're so protective of." What? I didn't understand what he meant. You're carrying it inside you like it's some precious treasure. Like it's the only thing I can't touch. But I can touch it, Maria. I can touch anything I want. Horror dawned on me as I understood his intention. "No," I said. "No, please, no." But pleading meant nothing to him. It never had. He called in soldiers. They held me down while he examined my belly with clinical detachment, pressing hard enough to make me scream, talking about how he could extract the baby, how he could show me that nothing was sacred, nothing was safe from him. I thought he would kill me then. I hoped he would. But he didn't. He released me and left, leaving me curled on the floor, terrified and in pain, praying to every saint that my baby was still alive inside me. The baby kicked the next morning. Strong, insistent kicks that said, "I'm still here, Mama. We're still fighting." And I knew then that I had to find a way to survive, not just for me, but for this life I was carrying. This innocent soul that deserved a chance at life, regardless of the circumstances of its conception and gestation. I went into labor on a cold morning in February. It was a month early, brought on perhaps by stress and trauma, perhaps by the baby's own will to escape the hell we were trapped in. The contractions started slow, then built in intensity until I could barely breathe through them. I was alone. The major had forbidden anyone to help me, wanting me to experience this most vulnerable moment without support. But old Rosa defied him. She came to my house when she heard my screams, risked her life to hold my hand and tell me how to breathe, how to push, how to survive this. Labor lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of pain layered on top of months of pain, of pushing a new life into a world that had shown me only cruelty. But when I heard that first cry, when Rosa placed my baby on my chest, a girl, my Sophia, something broke open inside me. Love. Pure, uncomplicated love. She was perfect. Tiny and red and screaming her fury at being born into this mess, but perfect. She had Carlos's nose, my eyes, and a full head of dark hair. She was ours. Mine and Carlos's. No one could take that from us. For 3 days I held her. I nursed her. I sang to her the same songs Carlos had sung to my belly. I memorized every detail of her face, knowing somehow that our time together would be brief, but desperately hoping I was wrong. On the 3rd day, the major came. He looked at Sophia in my arms, and something shifted in his expression. Not softness. He was incapable of that, but a kind of possessive interest that terrified me. "She's beautiful," he said. "I didn't think anything beautiful could come from you, from this situation. But she is. Please don't hurt her," I begged, all pretense of dignity abandoned. "Please. She's innocent. Whatever you want from me, whatever you want to do to me, I'll cooperate. Just don't hurt my baby." He reached out and touched Sophia's head, his hand huge against her tiny skull. She squirmed in her sleep but didn't wake. Such a fragile thing, he mused. So easily broken. What happened next haunts me more than anything else. More than the rapes, more than the beatings, more than watching my village burn. The major, with clinical precision and cold deliberation, took my 3-day-old baby from my arms. I fought. God, how I fought. But I was weak from childbirth. And he was strong and cruel. He held Sophia up, examined her like she was an object, and said, "I want to see what's inside. I want to understand what makes something so small so important to you." And then he did what no human being should be capable of. He took a knife, and while I screamed and begged and prayed, he cut my baby open. He vivisected my 3-day-old daughter while she was still alive, still crying, still reaching for me with tiny fists. I don't remember the rest of that day. My mind mercifully shut down, protecting itself from a reality too horrific to process. When I came back to consciousness, I was in the church, lying on the floor. Rosa was there, crying silently, and Sophia's small body, wrapped in a white cloth, was beside me. The Major had left her for me to bury. One final cruelty. I should have died then. Part of me did die. The part that believed in goodness, in justice, in God. That part was buried with my daughter in a small grave under the ceiba tree where Carlos and I had married. But the body is stubborn. It kept breathing, kept healing, kept living despite my wishes. And slowly, beneath the numbness and the grief, that core of rage I'd been nurturing began to grow into something else. Purpose. The war shifted. The Major's forces began losing ground. News came of atrocities being documented, of war crimes tribunals being planned. The world, finally, was paying attention. When liberation forces entered our village 3 months after Sophia's death, the Major tried to flee. But the women of the village, we who had suffered under his command, we stopped him. We formed a human chain, blocking the road, refusing to let him escape. The liberating forces took him into custody. And I, along with 7 other women, agreed to testify at his trial. The trial took place in the capital city, broadcast on national television. They flew us there, put us in hotels, treated us with a kindness that felt alien after so long. Lawyers prepared us for testimony, warned us it would be difficult, asked if we were sure we wanted to do this publicly. I was sure. I wanted the world to know what he'd done. I wanted his name attached to his crimes forever. I wanted him to be remembered not as a soldier or an officer, but as a monster. When I took the stand, the Major sat behind a table with his lawyers, dressed in a civilian suit, looking ordinary and unremarkable. He avoided my eyes at first, but I stared at him until he was forced to look up. And then I testified. For 4 hours, I told the court everything. Every violation, every cruelty, every moment of horror. I described what he did to me, to my village, to my daughter. I showed them the scars on my body, the medical records documenting my injuries. His lawyers tried to discredit me. They called me a liar, suggested I was mentally unstable, implied I had collaborated willingly. But there were 7 other women testifying to similar horrors. There were photographs, medical records, eyewitness accounts from soldiers who had served under him and were willing to tell the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by hanging. I attended his execution. Some people thought I shouldn't, that it would be too traumatic, that I should move on with my life and not dwell on the past. But they didn't understand. Watching him hang wasn't about revenge or closure. It was about bearing witness. It was about seeing justice, however imperfect and delayed, finally served. He didn't apologize. He didn't show remorse. He stood on the gallows with the same cold expression he'd always worn, and his last words were a defense of his actions as necessary wartime measures. But when the trapdoor opened and he dropped, when his neck snapped and his body went still, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Relief. Not happiness. I was too far gone for happiness, but relief that he could never hurt anyone else again. I'm 78 years old now. I never remarried. Never had other children. The trauma damaged my body in ways that made pregnancy impossible after Sophia. But I've lived a full life despite everything. I became a lawyer, specializing in war crimes and women's rights. I've helped hundreds of other survivors get justice, tell their stories, reclaim their voices. Do I still carry the pain? Every single day. There are nights when I wake up screaming, trapped in nightmares where I'm back in that house, back in that moment when Sophia was taken from me. There are days when I can barely function, when the weight of memory is too heavy to carry. But I'm still here. And that in itself is victory. The Major tried to break me. He tried to strip away my humanity, my dignity, my will to live. He almost succeeded. But here I am, decades later, telling my story, ensuring that what happened is documented and remembered. That's what survival means sometimes. Not healing, not moving on, not forgetting. Just continuing to exist, continuing to speak, continuing to bear witness to what happened so that it can never be denied or forgotten. If you're listening to this and you're a survivor of sexual violence, of war crimes, of any form of systematic cruelty, please know this. Your story matters. Your pain is real. Your survival is an act of resistance. Don't let anyone tell you to be quiet, to move on, to get over it. Speak when you're ready. And if you're never ready, that's okay too. But I'm ready now. After 57 years, I'm ready to put this testimony into the world and let others carry it with me. The major raped me while I was pregnant. He murdered my baby in the most horrific way imaginable. But he didn't win. Because I'm still here, still speaking, still ensuring that his crimes are remembered and condemned. I survived to see him hang. And I've survived every day since to make sure that monsters like him are brought to justice. That's my story. That's my testimony. That's my truth. And now it's yours too. If this testimony moved you, if it angered you, if it made you understand something about the human capacity for both cruelty and survival, please don't let it end here. Hit the like button. Not for me, but to help other survivors find this testimony. To help people understand what happens in war zones, what happens to women's bodies when they're treated as battlegrounds. Leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your reactions, your own stories if you're ready. Create a community of witnesses who refuse to look away from difficult truths. And subscribe. Because there are more stories that need to be told. More testimonies that deserve to be heard. More survivors who need to know they're not alone. The subscribe button is below. The comment section is waiting. Use your voice to amplify mine. Let's make sure these stories are never forgotten. Let's make sure justice, however delayed, is always pursued. Let's make sure survivors are believed, supported, and honored for their courage in speaking truth. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for caring enough to hear what's difficult to say. Now go, like, comment, subscribe. Help me turn this testimony into a movement for justice.